Stop, Elliot.
Yeah.
Where am I?
Joe, I've arrived. Okay, I'm going to mute my mic for you. Freaking people.
Okay, I have 6:31 on my clock, so I'll call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting number 1804 at 6:31 PM. I see we have a quorum. We have 5 regular members. Are there any added agenda items tonight?
There are not.
There was a legal notice. The East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a regular meeting on Tuesday, June 8th, 2021 at 6:30 PM via the remote video conferencing platform Zoom. The following public hearing will be held. PZ-2021-19 SJK Properties LLC text amendment application to the East Windsor zoning regulations, section 802, which is multifamily development district, MFDD. A full copy of the application is available on the town clerk's webpage and on the Planning and Zoning Commission's webpage on the town website. All interested persons may attend the online meeting and public hearing to be heard on this topic. Dated May 26, 2021. This appeared in the Journal Enquirer on May 27th, as well as June 3rd, 2021. This is the public participation portion of our meeting. Are there any comments from the audience for something that's not already on tonight's agenda?
Yeah, we're listening to this.
Any comments from the audience for something that's not already on tonight's agenda? Okay, take that as a no. Next up, under item 6, approval of minutes. We'll take these independently. The first one for consideration is May 11th, 2021. Members of the commission, any comments, corrections, edits for the May 21st, 2021 minutes?
Joe, I was absent. I abstain.
Any other members of the commission have any comments to offer on the May 11th meeting? Okay, not hearing any, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move to approve the minutes of regular meeting number 1802 which was May 11th, 2021.
There's a motion on the table for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. A call for a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise their hand.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Item B, the minutes for May 25th, 2021. Any comments, corrections, or edits from the commission? Not hearing any, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move to approve the minutes of regular meeting 1803, which was May 25th, 2021.
There's a motion for approval on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. Those in favor say aye or raise their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
I see 5 hands, the motion approved.
Motion.
Next up, under item 8, performance bonds, actions, permit extensions, road acceptance. There's an item for West River Farms.
Is it the motion for him to hear?
I asked that if you're not speaking, please put your thing on mute. Thank you. Mike D'Amato?
So, yeah, this is a bit of a discussion. We can go through it now, unless you would rather get started with the public hearing and move this. It's up to you. I just want to kind of go over the status of the project and where things are, and then have the commission take a bit of consideration for a potential action.
So why don't I think we should do that. If you look at the attendees on the call, the meeting tonight, I'm sure most of them are interested in the new public hearing. So why don't we consider a motion to move this item later in our agenda, just before our business meeting? Mike, you think that would work for you, right after correspondence?
Yeah, I think that's better.
Okay. So would someone kindly offer a motion just to move this item under item number 8 for discussion, West River Farms, to later on in our agenda?
I'll move to adjust the agenda such that the item 8, performance bonds related to West River Farms, be moved to the agenda just before the business meeting after correspondence.
There's a motion on the table to move this item in the agenda to somewhere else on the, later on in the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise their hand.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously, so we'll talk about that later. Next up, under item 10 on the agenda, new public hearings, PZ 2021-19, a text amendment application, the East Windsor zoning regulations, section 802.1 and 802.4, multifamily development district, MFDD, applicant SJK Properties LLC. Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems like I'm in front of you guys quite a lot, almost feel like I'm back on the commission here. But for the record, Merrick Kemet representing SJK Properties on this text amendment to section 802.4 of the MFDD regulations. Before I get into that, I just want to do the purpose and a quick recap or a history of how I got to this point here in front of you. As you recall, we are proposing individual single-family residential homes that will fall under a homeowners association. As you know, back in October of last year, I met with this commission, which I was upfront on a record that there was a need to increase the density to push this development forward. That night, I left with a positive reaction based on a conceptual 4-unit density yielding 156 units. Now, obviously, that was too aggressive, and we did scale that back by half, and the past application before you was for 88 units. This appeared to be ideal, basically since the site is serviced by public water and by public sewer. But apparently that too was not acceptable. With that said, the new application before you provides a more restrictive version of that text amendment originally proposed. Now, before I get into the actual text amendment and the changes, we did offer substantial changes to the regulations, and per the regulations, I am allowed to speak in front of you, bringing up that past text amendment. But what I want to do is just bring up some clarifications and points of consideration before I get into the nits to it. This text amendment promotes housing diversity as provided by the POCD. Throughout the MFDD regulations, single-family housing opportunities are encouraged and permitted. Section 802.1 under purpose states in part, it is the intent of these regulations to permit the development of single-family planned residential developments, which we are proposing. Our project, which utilizes an HOA, the homeowners association concept, falls under a condominium or a community associated type of development. So as section 802.22 of the regulations state, for a change of zone, that no development plan or special permit for residential condominiums shall be approved by the commission except in the MFDD zone. So that's why we are proposing to go forward within the MFDD regulations for our HOA development. Because our, excuse me, because our project will be a private development, there will be no town roads. This will eliminate the need for any town maintenance and eliminate egress through any existing subdivision. You also have a CROG referral dated April 8th, which states that there is no conflict with regional plans or policies. That also recommends that zoning for cluster type developments are allowed. I know at the last public hearing, traffic was brought up, which was discussed after the public hearing was closed. I don't believe that should have been part of it because that kind of creates a site-specific discussion, which this is not. This is a text amendment which affects the entire town. Any traffic discussion should be made during the design stage if that were the case. Now, in front of you, you should have a letter that I submitted to the commission dated May 4th. And in there, I just wanted to bring up the concern with the density. In the center of the page, there's 2 bullets. So I just want to explain to you what that means. So back in 2005, 2006, the Quarry Meadow subdivision was approved with a density factor of 1 unit per acre. Developable acres did not exist back then. It was just per acre. So we have 48 acres, therefore the density allowed was 48 lots. Now that, since we have to reapply to the zoning regulations for that development to move forward because the Quarry Meadow subdivision has expired, the new regulations for the R3 zone reduces the density to 0.9 per developable acres. Now, since we have approximately 44 acres of developable acres times 0.9, that yields the new lot situation at 39 lots. We lost 9 lots right off the bat by reapplying to this commission. So basically, we couldn't move forward with 48 lots. There's no way we can move forward with 39 lots. So hence, that's why we are before you again. Can I share the screen? Are we open?
I have no objection.
Yep, you should be all set.
Can everybody see that?
Yes,
Yes, all right, thank you. Okay, so what I want to do is I just want to get into the changes to the section 802.4 that applies to this text amendment. And what I did was I bolded the areas and I highlighted it, and those are the areas that are going to be, that we're requesting the amendment to. So in the beginning, it states that no area shall be rezoned to a multifamily development district without the submission of a concept plan which designates a specific development type, A, C, E, or P, to be constructed, and unless the applicant has demonstrated the commission has determined that follow. So that section right there was actually suggested by town staff, which we had no objection to adding it in there, and it actually is a way to visualize what the proposals in the future for other properties would be. So we have no problem with that. Just to keep everybody who's listening in, the A stands for apartments, the C stands for condominium type projects, the E is for elderly housing, and the P is for planned residential developments. So moving down, the section A, subsection A is not going to be changed, but it is important to note that for C, E, and P, that the site needs to be at least 4 acres in area. And that A, for apartments, the site has to be 25 acres. But for apartments, I just want everyone to be clear that the only way you can have apartments is if it has frontage on a state highway, either Route 5 or 191. So even like the site of Quarry Meadows, that site could not have apartments no matter what, because it doesn't comply with this regulation. So what we're moving forward is just the C type, just for condominiums. Subsection B, that the site is to be serviced by public water and municipal sewer. We added the section, also suggestion by town staff, to just outlining that it's identified by the town sewer service area map, which is on file with the town. And part C is the main change. So the regulation states that for AC, E, and P, the site is to be located within a village area or a non-rural area. But we are adding the following highlighted section, so which reads, however, for C, now this is only for the condominium type projects, no apartments or elderly housing is permitted, just C. If the site is not located within one of the aforementioned areas, then a site may be located within a rural area as identified on a residential growth guide plan as amended, provided all of the following criteria have been satisfied. So one of the material changes that I did create was that it's number 1, that the property to be developed is located within the R3 or agricultural zones. At the last meeting, I believe Commissioner Gobin had concerns about other areas of town, specifically behind the St. Catherine Cemetery, or what other affected areas would potentially be across the board. So we kind of restricted it to only allow for the R3 or the agricultural zones. Now, the R3, you can see the R3, the only area of the R3 is on the Ellington town line. And the area, agriculture areas are primarily located in the upper left-hand corner, pretty much right where the mansions at Canyon Ridge are located now. So those are the only areas that would be affected. And the rest of it you can see in the map, and you should have a copy of that map in front of you. All other areas have been taken out. The reason I left the A1 zone in there is because if I didn't, our site would be the only one that would qualify for this regulation. And therefore we are creating a text amendment just to be site specific, which we cannot do. So I had to pick a zone that would be beneficial to that application. Those areas of the A1, some of those areas are a lot of wet areas as well. So, not a great area, but it is on the outside of the rural, right on the fringe, and right next to an existing apartment complex, which is actually the ideal spot for this. Moving down to number 2, this also is a material of substantial change. So it reads, except for properties on a state highway. I didn't want to discourage any other opportunities on a state highway, which could actually have a higher density yield. But except for properties on a state highway, the density shall be reduced to 1.5 dwelling units per acre of developable land on the tract. So originally, back in October, I presented 156 units. That's roughly based on a 4-unit density. Then we reduced that by half to a 2-unit density. Now we're further reducing it almost 75% to a 1.5 unit density. So what that means in particular for our site is that based on the 44 developable acres, times the 1.5, our maximum yield would be approximately 66 units. Keep in mind, there's 48 acres in East Windsor, but we also have 15 acres in Ellington. So as a whole tract of that area, we're looking at about 63 acres, and we're asking for 66 houses. So it, practicality, it's almost 1 unit per acre if you look at it as a bigger picture. I know you can't look at the other town, but just in Columbus, that area is about 63 acres. Number 3, the property to be developed is limited to detached single-family residential units. This remained the same from the prior ones. Our entire intent from the beginning has been to have detached single-family houses. They're not going to be duplexes, quads. There's going to be no common wall. These are all going to be single-family, 2-car garage houses. That was the intent, and that's going to remain there. And then number 4, any secondary means of egress shall be from an arterial or collector roadway and in accordance with section 802.17. That too is also left as it was prior. And for instance, the Sullivan Farm Road subdivision, that roadway is considered a local street. So there would be no access through a development of that type. That's pretty much the changes that we're proposing. But keep in mind that the approval of this text amendment does not allow anyone or everyone to be allowed to develop their properties under this. A zone change is still required, which gives the commission the ability to review each application on a case-by-case basis. So if there was another property that came before you and this didn't fit in that area, this commission has the opportunity to deny that application on a case-by-case basis. The sewer was another issue that was brought up at the last public hearing, and I believe it was by Commissioner Kowalski regarding this site. No other site can tie into our system. It's under a force main. It cannot happen. In addition, none of the other properties fall within the sewer service area. It ideally, strangely enough, excuse me if I get there. Our site is right here in white. The white area is the only area that is allowed to be serviced by the sewer. So any other properties would not have the opportunity to tie into our force main. Before they could do that, they would have to go to the WPCA and get approval to have this changed. So I just want to clarify that from the last public hearing. At this point, we don't see any other ways to move forward with this development as discussed back in October. And without this text amendment, I feel that we are, dead in the water for development on this site. We have sewer and water. It is serviced by that. It's an old gravel pit. So we've already purged the water table, so we cannot get septic systems out there. So sewer is the only means of having, that type of utility. So at this time, I want to thank you for your time and for your consideration. And if there's any questions, I'm be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Merrick. So why don't we take, before we take public comment, I'm going to query the members of the commission and see if they have any comments for Merrick. So Jim, we'll start with you tonight. Do you have any comments for Merrick?
Where'd Jim go?
I don't know where Jim went. No, I see him. He's in the middle of my screen. Well, we'll come back to Jim. Ann, how about you?
I have a question which I think is for Mike D'Amato. Somebody
Okay.
sent in a comment and raised the concept of material change in situation, that a applicant can't be reconsidered unless they wait a year, unless there's a material change in the situation. So I hear Merrick saying there's a material change in his mind in the application because he's made a couple of changes. but is a material change or a change in the application the same as a change in the situation? It's unusual wording to me. So Mike, I don't know if you can shed a little light on how to interpret that.
I think that what it boils down to is that the commission has discretion. If you feel that there's been a material change, and yes, we can very, very easily argue what that means. But I think what it boils down to is that the commission has the discretion to make a determination, as I think you've done in the past with other applications, that you don't want to rehear it, and statute says that you're not mandated to. Merrick did include his sort of position as to what had changed and why. But I think that the commission as a whole has the discretion to make that determination.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Kulowski, excuse me. Comments, questions?
Yeah, question, Merrick. Do you have a conceptual plan ready that you can share with us on this? As you're trying to add into this application?
I do have it on my laptop ready to view. I just wasn't sure if it's appropriate because it's a site-specific concept. I'm willing to show it because everybody knows what this is for. So I don't mind if you want to, I'll leave that up to you. I can show it to you. Mr. Chairman?
What do you think?
Well, Mike, what exactly are you trying to get at?
Yeah,
What I'm thinking is, we've run up against a lot of opposition because I think it's the fear of the unknown. So I think if he's up forward and laying it all out exactly what he plans, how he plans to lay it out, it may alleviate some of the fears.
I have no problem.
but Mr. Chairman, the application is not for the site approval. I'm not in favor of looking at it now.
I just brought it up because he made that a condition of the text amendment change.
So remember, this is a multi-step process. For anything, any site development occur here, step one is a text amendment change, which we're talking about tonight. Step two, provided that the text amendment is approved, is a zone change. As part of the zone change, that's when the map or the site details are unveiled. And the third step will be the special use permit. Mike DeMao, did I correctly categorize the process which they are sticking a shovel in the ground here?
Right. Yes, this is just a discussion about zoning regulations, no different than any other text amendment that we've had.
Well, let me just jump in and add, for Mike, basically the layout that we had previously is a locked-in layout. I have road infrastructure already in place. There's no way to relocate roads or add roads or do any of that. So if you took the last layout and only had 66 units on there, it really does spread things out quite a bit. I've lost a lot of units, and they're all going to be frontages off of those roadways. So there's going to be no cluster type concepts like we originally had back in October. But like I said, I am willing to show you if you guys want to see it.
I'm okay.
But yeah, I suggest that this is not the time and the place for that, even though, Merrick, I applaud you for having it ready to show us. Obviously your intentions are very honorable, but right now it's the text amendment that we're concerned with.
Okay, so on those lines, if we're talking about amending the text for a planned community, should there be any provisions that there should be communal amenities required as part of a planned community?
Well, those fall under the regulations of the MFDD, which they have those right in the regulations themselves now. So we would have
Okay.
to, it would fall under that regulation. Yeah, open space,
Okay.
recreation stuff, yeah, all that's in there. And also just to add, we're looking at 66 versus 48. It's an increase to 18 more units. Better than nothing, but it's, trying to work with the town and the residents out there, and we're trying to move forward with something, and I don't know what else to do.
And
Mike, any other comments or questions at this time?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I read some of the articles that were sent to us by some concerned citizens. And I have some concerns, and perhaps our town planner can straighten me out. But it's my understanding that the POCD is not a legal document. And if it's not a legal document, which I don't think it is, the difference between shall and will, et cetera, does not have any legal connotation. And if it were, then we wouldn't really probably have to have a planning and zoning commission, because that would tell us what we could and could not do. So I think the POCD, which was written quite a while ago, times have changed. The economy's changed. The number of houses being built, as noted by our town planner, has changed.
Your camera's not on.
I think it's a guide for us. And when we made it out, and I was part of that, our guide was for the health, wealth, and safety for the community. But times have changed. And if you're going to nitpick the POCD with words, I just don't think that's applicable.
Yeah, so the statute says that the commission has to consider what the POCD says. But if the POCD says that you shall do this or you may not do that, it's a guidance document only. And because, the POCD is a 10-year document, a lot can change in a decade. The purpose of that is to create some consistency amongst, how the town moves forward with various components. But that was something that I tried to sort of in a neutral way outline in my comments, because we tie a lot of the things that we say in the POCD to this guide plan that Merrick just showed. But the guide plan was adopted, but was not changed during the last POCD. It was created during the previous POCD. And one of the things the POCD recommends is it says you should follow the growth and guide plan. And then it says you should also amend the growth and guide plan. So it's asking you to follow what it says and telling you to modify what it says at the same time. So I think that boils down to, yes, it should guide you, but you as a commission need to decide when it's not in touch with the current realities, market, with the goals of the town. You have to recognize that it's not going to meet the letter of everything, because things change, as we saw through COVID. I mean, things have changed really, really quickly.
Frank, do you have any other comments or questions?
No, not at this time.
Jim, I see that you're back.
Yeah, I switched computers. I got my wife's computer now. I have no questions at this time. I heard everything that Merrick said with his proposal. Thank you.
So with that, we'll begin our public comment process. So when I call on you, kindly identify, please state your name and your address for the record. And I'm going to try to get to everyone once before I go back and entertain follow-up questions. So I see Gina Kuchar has her hand up, so I'll entertain Gina Kuchar first. Go ahead, Gina. Gina, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
All set. I guess my question is what has changed from the beginning to now? Is we went from 150 something lots down to 60 something lots. 60 something lots is obviously much more doable as far as a budding neighbor. My concern is that if it keeps changing, what's going to keep it from changing back? Because the conceptual plan does not need to be submitted at this point. And once you open that door, obviously things keep changing. I think most of us that live in the neighborhood did our due diligence when we built here and understood that 48 houses would be built at some time. Did not sign up for 150 or 90 or whatever it's going to end up being. I guess I'm just concerned about, it's been all over the place and I don't understand what changed for the developer. Why the 48 can't be done, why it needs to go to more. Maybe if that question could get answered, it'd be understandable. I don't understand why that's being entertained again when it's been denied and now it's back again. And it just, I guess if I could get some understanding, that'd be great.
Thank you. Merrick, would you like to try to take a stab at that?
Basically, you got two things. You got the infrastructure costs, which have increased, and then you got the value of the building lot has decreased. So there's no way to make anything work. It's economics at that point. And back in 2005, 2006, it was the height of the market. It was, those were $100,000 lots at that time, and then we had the crash in 07, 08, and then now they were worth 40, if that.
Seems
So,
that the market has rebounded though now.
yeah, but I don't have 48 lots right now. And if I resubmit,
Okay,
I'll
but
be down to
then
39.
do you
So
change text amendment to tailor it to that? I don't know. I guess that's my question. Why are we changing it? Because the economic situation changed for you. Is that keeping what's consistent with the neighborhood? 66 is way more consistent with what we have here than if you would put 150 down there. But that's where we started, and I don't understand, or I don't understand how there's a guarantee that it won't go back up to 80 or 90 or 150 again.
If I could just jump in.
Yeah.
well, I was just going to simply say that the regular the areas cannot change of the property. I have 44 acres. That's all I can deal with, and we're talking about a density factor of 1.5. So the maximum yield is approximately 66 lots. So I cannot go higher than that. If I wanted to go higher, I would have to be back in front of this board for another text amendment to change it, and that's not going to happen. So,
Okay, but we've been back in front of the board multiple times to change it. So I guess that's my concern, is that will it get changed again? And
Well, Gina, I mean, as a property owner, he has that right. He could ask for changes all the time.
Okay.
It's up to this board to decide if there's a material change in the previous application, and
Okay.
whether or not an application is approved or denied. I mean,
I
every
understand.
homeowner has that right.
Okay, is there a material change?
We haven't had that discussion among the commission members, but I think that there is a feeling that there has been. And Merrick did lay those out during his initial presentation to us regarding what, in his opinion, those material changes were. How this application is different than the previous one, other than the number of lots.
Okay,
Okay, someone else, question, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Paul, go ahead.
Okay, it's Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Broadbrook. I don't have a method to raise my hand, so I had to say something.
No problem. I recognize that.
A couple of comments. The property in Ellington was brought up during the presentation, which I think was inappropriate. No matter if you had 1,000 acres in Ellington adjacent to this property, it has zero bearing, and it confuses the issue. But it's not all criticism. It is there. But I wasn't happy to hear that. And then I have a comment about the applicability of the POCD. The POCD currently is less than 5 years old. It is not old. And the statement of making amendments to any part of the POCD or any part of any documents in town would be as an as-needed basis, and that would have been determined by the Public and Planning and Zoning Commission. So if the changes to other things were not made, then it wasn't deemed appropriate at that time, and that's less than 5 years ago. This is a current document. It is not obsolete and out of touch. This is an incredible amount of work went into this, with many, many heavily participated in meetings with the public, and there was tremendous interest in coming up with a real good working document, and we felt we did that, and we think it should be looked at with a very cautious eye to making changes. But I'm talking about the POCD and PZC and changes in general, not necessarily this specific project, although I look at what we have here, and while I certainly don't like to step on anybody's capability of using their property in some reasonable fashion, I have my concerns. We do not need the housing density in this town. We have lots of it. And the idea of keeping it into areas where there's already some level of density makes more sense to me than spreading it out to the very outskirts of town. But that's my opinion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Someone else? Yes, sir, your hand raised. George?
Yeah, George Deek, 7 Eastwood Drive. Couple of comments. I don't believe there's been a material change in the situation. That would, in my understanding, be a change to the property, to access to the property, or something of that nature, not a minor tweak to the language in the application. Another comment, at some point, the maximum density was reduced from 1 per acre to 0.9. And now we're being asked to increase it from 0.9 to 1.5 to accommodate one person. That's not in the best interest of the town. As far as the economics go, there's a development going up right now, right down the road from this property on the corner of East Road and Depot Street, in Zone R3, and it's being developed in full compliance with the current regulations. So it is possible economically to develop property within the current regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just rebut real quick.
Sure, no problem.
That development that he's talking about is apples and oranges. Those are all frontage lots. There's no roadway or infrastructure design. Those are all on septic system, not on sewer or designing a $1 million pump station to bring in sewer. So it's apples and oranges on that development.
I don't buy that. Sorry.
Someone else in the community have any questions or comments? Please feel free to unmute yourself. Yes, sir. I see Sandy in the corner. You don't, go ahead, sir.
Well, I like Jim on my wife's computer, so my
No
name
problem.
is Leonard Dion, and I'm at 13 Eastwood Drive. And to me, I think going back to the fewer number of single-family development units in that area sounds a lot better to me. But what I would like to ask Merrick, how, when you were going through your presentation, you seemed to emphasize a lot the C, the condominium portion of the changes. And so that made me a little bit weary. Just the way you wanted to bring that element in.
Chairman. Basically, C just designates just for that type of development. If we left it open to everything, that opens a door to have apartments out there, and that was a no-no from the beginning. There's no intention of doing apartments or elderly housing, so we just emphasized on the C. The reason we're doing C is that the entire project is based, we want to do a homeowners association type. So no one has to mow their lawn, no one has to plow their driveway. It's all done by an HOA. They're all single family homes spread out on the development. We're looking at 66 houses now on the acreage of land that's out there. It's not a big increase from the 48 at all. I don't see it. I don't see the issue here. As far as the residents of Sullivan Farm Road, they're not going to even see this. There's not going to be an impact to them because there's going to be no egress going through that roadway based on this. But just to recap something that was brought up months ago, if we went with a formal subdivision, now you're going to have a lot more traffic on Sullivan Farm Road. And this is just a concept that we came up with to make everybody happy.
Thank you.
And it seems like I can't make everybody happy, so.
Someone else in the community.
I'm there. I'm in.
Hello,
Okay.
Norring Farmer, 247 South Water Street. I don't believe it's in the town's best interest to do text amendments for on-off things for a particular subdivision. What happens here, someone can take that and move it to anywhere else in the town and say, well, you know, you did it out there and we just want to tweak it from, well, now it's not going to be R3, but it's going to be this. We have large plots of land available in this town, and making amendments to things not during the plan of conservation and development studies and all of that, I don't think it ever bodes well for us. You know, back in 2005, we had the people here on my street trying to put in 200 apartment buildings under a special use permit. And in that particular situation, it didn't happen, but it was based upon a neighborhood type situation. In our town, we don't have a lot of people from my side of town knowing what's going on that side of town, the intricate things. There's not a lot of publicity about things. And so sometimes you miss out on these kinds of things. And I think it's up to you guys as the planning board to understand that this is townwide. What happens here can be used for somebody who wants something in Warehouse Point, which is frankly supposed to be for that purpose. But making individual text amendment changes for individual developments, I don't think is a wise choice for our town. If you want to look at it under a plan of conservation and development retool, that would be something to think about. When you have more people who know about it, it's more publicized, they can come in, they can speak on their portion of town, as well as hear from people on the other portion of town. But to do it because somebody wants to develop, I don't think bodes well for the entire town. So I don't think you should be doing it. Thanks.
Thank you. Antoinette, there was you guys were trying to get my attention. You're up next. Go ahead. You're on mute.
Okay. I just had a comment.
Can you just identify yourself for the
Oh,
record?
I'm sorry. Okay. My name is Antonetta Daigle and I live at 173 Depot Street. And it seems like not many people from Depot Street that I'm aware of have, commented. So I'll put my 2 cents in for us. I'm concerned obviously about the greater volume of traffic. that's going to be happening. We live, 4 or 5 houses down from the entryway where, as you mentioned, cars will be going in and out. And when you comment that the traffic will not be going through the neighborhood behind us, they will all be emptying onto Depot Street. That does not allay my concerns about the amount of traffic that's going to be increasing on Depot Street. It's already, people drive very fast on it. It's a narrow road, and quite frankly, it's not really well, it's all broken up, and I don't know if that's anything that's going to be addressed. The road itself is a mess, especially down more towards where the development's going to be. But I think it's important to be mindful that although us on Depot Street don't live in a cul-de-sac or a closed off neighborhood, it is linear, it's still a neighborhood, and you have residents that live there that probably are not going to be happy with extra traffic. I'm very happy that the volume is going down, as you mentioned. That's a good thing in my book, but that is the concern. I walk, and it's kind of dangerous just walking on the road as it is now, so I'm trying to imagine that much more traffic on Depot Street. So those are just my concerns about the whole thing.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Someone else we haven't heard from before.
Hey, Joe, I can't see who's raising hands, and I can't raise hand because I'm on my phone because I'm having computer issues too. So it put me in safe driving mode. Anyway, this is Alan Baker, 340 Rye Street. I just wanted to point out that the POCD is rightly characterized as a guidance document, but I would like to point out that guidance, much like Mr. Anderson was saying, that comes from the people of this town. So, while it is guidance, it is the guidance of the people that live here that kind of wanted to shape how their community is going to look like. So I just think that you need to give it some weight when you're making your decisions. So, and as far as this particular text amendment is concerned, I think at this point in time, people can argue whether or not we want to do a text amendment or not, but I think the way this one is written, it does seem to right size this project for this neighborhood. And I'm just concerned, and maybe Merrick, you could talk to this, and I know you spoke to this in earlier versions of this text amendment. How does this new density factor that you have for this text amendment factor into how the other properties that you pointed out could be developed potentially? Did you look at that recently?
Mr. Chairman?
Sure, go ahead, Merrick. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Still right, taking my notes.
Yeah. No, I didn't look at individual pieces of property and designing their properties and figuring out their densities. What I did was I just overlaid the sewer service map over the rural area and just outlined what properties would be affected. And the only properties in the R3 zone are the properties of Quarry Meadows and the sites to the north, which cannot be developed because there's no ability for a septic system out there, and there's no sewer availability for that site. So that's a dead piece of property. And then the agricultural zones, which I outlined in that map, that's the only areas that it would be affected. So that would be a case-by-case basis in front of this board, whether that area would be sufficient or not.
Okay, any other comments or questions, members of the audience? If someone else would like to go again, any additional questions? Someone who's already spoken and have additional questions? Go ahead, George.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
Go.
I think, Paul, I'll get back to you in a second. George, looks like you had your hand up first. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I'd like to understand a little bit more about the change in maximum density from 1.0 to 0.9. When did that occur, and what were the drivers behind that?
Merrick, would you like to answer that question?
No, this is a question for the zoning folks.
Yeah, I honestly don't know the answer to that one. I don't know when you guys changed it.
At this point, I am just collecting information, so I don't have an answer or an opinion to your question. If anyone else from the commission wish to answer, go right ahead. George's question.
Would it be a safe assumption that this was implemented for the sole reason of reducing density?
Who is that question for, George?
Anybody? The zoning folks primarily.
I'm not prepared to answer that one personally.
I am the newest person here, but I think that when Merrick was speaking about it earlier, the change in density was related to the town.
They asked if anybody else wanted to say something. I've been trying to do it, but I don't know how.
Go up to where it says more in the top.
More?
We'll get you in just a moment. Someone else is speaking now.
I don't see anything more up on top of my screen. I lost her.
She's trying to do this too.
Right. I want to go up and do more, but there's nothing.
Lance and Mary.
I-
Okay, Mike D'Amato.
I think that if I heard Merrick's statement correctly, the reduction in the yield that happened from the time the project was originally approved simply gets to the town's starting to look at developable acres versus just standard acreage. So if you have steep slopes on the property, for example, that wouldn't contribute to the total yield of the site. And based on his presentation, my takeaway, and we can certainly look into this, was that the town started determining density based on developable land versus just raw land. So he lost 9 lots. And I may be mischaracterizing that, and we can certainly look into it.
Well, there's 2 things. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that. Changing from raw acreage to developable acres will by itself reduce the density because there are going to be some parcels or some portions of a parcel that cannot be developed. But in addition to that, the number was reduced from 1.0 to 0.9. So those 2 changes reduce the maximum density on any piece of property. And there had to be a reason for that. And the only reason I can think of is to simply reduce the maximum density allowed, both by counting only developable, that's a tough one, developable land, and reducing the number from 1.0 to 0.9. So what
George,
you
I can try to answer some of that.
is to completely go against that. Go from 0.9 to 1.5, when there was a conscious effort at some point in time to reduce it significantly by counting only developable acres and reducing the number from 1.0 to 0.9.
So George, I don't know exactly the year that was changes were made, but yes, I was on the commission at the time, as well as I can think of another colleague that was also on the commission. I don't exactly remember the circumstances, but what I can tell you is that zoning regulations, subdivision regulations are something that is looked at regularly for some odd reason, best practices, best interests of the town. And there must have been something that triggered it at the town. I'm going to go out on a limb. It's going to have to say probably over 10 years ago, those requirements were changed. Maybe Connecticut best practices, or we had a planning consultant at the time provide some recommendations, or perhaps it was part of the POCD development or relook at that time. And as a result of the POCD, we went and made the formal changes as part of our regulations. So you're right, there was a trigger. But what exactly created that trigger, I don't know. But it is not uncommon for regulations to be reviewed from time to time. Go ahead.
Now we're being asked to ignore all of that, whatever happened to reduce it, to accommodate one person on one parcel of land. So you're taking something that was developed and thought out and put through some kind of process and implemented town-wise. You're taking that, tossing it aside to accommodate this one person potentially, which is not the right thing to do.
Potentially, yes, George, and that's what this commission needs to deliberate after we gather our evidence and hear from the public.
Okay,
So we have some tough decisions to be made.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a statement?
Sure can.
So all properties in the town of East Windsor are different areas, different zones, different businesses, different uses, they're all different. And sometimes you can't have a regulation across the board to accommodate all of those properties. So that's why there is the ability to do a text amendment or a zone change. If that was the case, then why do we have an application for text amendment and zone changes? They should just be outlawed. Because every property has unique differences and needs some changes or tweaks to move forward. So not every property is the same is what I'm trying to get at.
I don't see anything unique about this other than it's yours and you wanted to build more houses.
It's in the rural area.
Okay, Lance and Mary, you guys express an interest to speak. Are you still interested? If you're trying to speak, you're on mute.
Do you know how to mute off?
You're unmuted. Feel free to speak. Okay, we'll move on to Braggs. Go right ahead. Yes, sir. You're waving. You're on mute.
Yes, hi, 17 Eastwood Drive, Broadbrook, Connecticut. I have a letter from Mike D'Amato saying, while the text change will adjust the criteria for future properties to be developed under the MFDD regulations. So obviously other properties would also be able to go under different text amendments to be changed also if this gets approved, because it's going to set precedent within the town, correct? I guess that is for Mike D'Amato, because this is, I'm looking at a letter from him of 20 acres plus that me and him went back and forth on. And this is his last sentence of that letter, saying other properties would be able to also go into this criteria for future.
Are you referring to the memo that I wrote for this application or previous applications?
Well, it's an MFDD regulation, so it's going to carry
Right.
over to any MFDD.
But the application that is currently before the commission has different criteria than the previous one. So the memo that I wrote previously doesn't have the same applicability that it would to this application.
Talking about parcels of land.
Yeah, but we're just talking parcels of land in general with MFDD, with somebody come with a text amendment to change. So you're saying other properties now would not be able to do this? Or are you saying that? Go ahead.
And any person can come in and ask for a text amendment or a zone change. They could ask to come in and use the existing criteria, or if approved, the criteria that is before the commission now. The reason why it's very hard to talk about, and I think I said this in my correspondence to you at some point, the universe of these changes is that we could have every parcel in town could be less than 20 acres. But if I buy two that are next to each other and combine them, I now have 20 acres. So we're simply looking at a snapshot in time. The applicability of any of these applications is not definitive. But at the end of the day, any MFDD zone change application has to come before the commission, and it has to meet all of those standards. So someone could buy 5 or 6 pieces of land and combine them. And while it's not on the map now, it could be 25 acres and it could become something that meets these standards. So anybody still has to come before the commission to seek a zone change, and then if approved, then get approval for the specific development. So So as far as precedent and how this would impact another property, Merrick did talk about the number of parcels that exist today that could come in right now. But any of that can change moving forward because parcel lines move all the time, which is why that number is very hard to pin down.
Correct, because in your letter, you're saying there were 68 properties that basically could fall under this. Merrick's saying there's only his piece of property. But obviously, as people sell land, then anything could change. But I think that's the concern of the town in general, is this MFDD going into a rural zone? Is the traffic, the speed, everything else that's gonna come with the,
I mean, people don't stop for Depot and East Road now.
Yeah.
What's it gonna be like with 66 more homes times at least 2 cars per home? I mean, they're not stopping now for traffic.
right? Oh, before I let go, the lady and gentleman that were talking on Depot Street, that sewer line is not going to be able to be tapped into. That's a pressurized line. So anybody on Depot Street cannot tap into that line. That's only for their property and their property only. So that's not gonna, it's not gonna help you by going by your house with sewer. I guess that's it, right? Comment? Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
I got it.
Go right ahead, Lance and Mary. Yep.
Yeah, hi. It's been a while. I can't figure this out. What I wanted to ask.
Okay, can you
is,
just kindly introduce yourself and
Oh,
your
I'm
address?
sorry.
for the
Yes,
record?
yes. My name is Mary Matat. My husband's name is Lance Matat. I just wanted to ask Mark a question. I've known you for a very long time, Mark, and I'm going to ask you this question. Why does we have to have that many homes put in that area? A long time ago, if I remember correctly, you said that when we all were here, that you wanted to build another 37 homes in that area, like our development here. None of the neighbors don't mind you building another 37 homes. Nobody cares. You could have done anything you wanted with 37, even 40 homes. But unfortunately, you want to go from 188 down to 88, and now you're down to 66. I want to know why you have to have that many. Why can't you do less than that? But if you have to have that, why can't you do senior living? Those are a set age group. There are not a lot of kids. There won't be a lot of riffraff. Why can't we have it that way? Or it's something else, but for what you want to do, I think that you're asking an awful lot for us to take in with all that homes and all those people and all that traffic. I just don't think it's fair. And it's in our backyard. It's not in any one of your backyards out there. Not one. It's in our backyard. It's not in Joe Olette's backyard, and it's damn not in Frank's backyard. I can guarantee you that. And it's not in anybody else's backyard but ours. So I'm asking, why does it have to be that way? Why can't we just have something simple? Why does it have to be so huge?
If I
was my
might add,
question.
I wouldn't mind it being in my backyard.
Oh, really? Let me park it in your backyard then, Frank. Matter of
Merrick, do
fact,
you
I'll
wish-
even help them build it.
Merrick, do you wish to answer any of those questions?
I'll,
that
I'll
were-
be brief. It's basic economics. It costs $5 million to develop that property. Do the math, do the lots. It doesn't work. So I don't know what else to tell you on that part of it. And my sister lives adjacent to this site, so it is in her backyard. So why would we do anything to jeopardize that, Mary?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that it's 66 homes, Mark. Why
you
can't
won't
it
even
be
see
less
them.
than 66 houses? Why do you have to have that many? Go ahead.
You won't even see them. They will not affect your properties. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, I have to
If
tell
we
you,
do the
Mark,
48 lots, if we do the 48 lots, they'll be running through your development. And if that's the case, then we're gonna have to figure something else out. I don't know. There's nothing else. We're dead in the water, so.
all I'm saying is that if you went around to the neighborhood and you asked every single neighbor in this neighborhood before you even started doing this, and you asked everybody what they thought and felt, instead of being the way you guys did do it, and we found out later on, I think that the least the neighbors would have told you what they really wanted. And there wouldn't be a fight or an argument with you. We would at least sit down and say, okay, well, let's try to figure this out. But it's not like that. So we all have to stand up here and fight for something that we don't want. And I know I'm not the only one in this neighborhood that don't want it, Mark. There's everybody in this neighborhood, and it goes past our neighborhood. It's going down Depot Street and all the other areas that don't want it. So it's not just us. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not at all. I just like my neighborhood. I like the area that we have. I don't know why we have to change the zone. I like it just the way it is. It's supposed to be this way. If you change that zone, anybody at any time can do whatever they want. They can build whatever they want.
That is not true.
That's how I see it. And I'm sorry, but that's how I see it, Mark.
Okay, is there some other comments from the public? Feel free, if you've already spoken, you have additional comments, willing to
Mr. Chairman?
entertain those also. Yes, sir, go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. It's Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Broadbrook. What I'm going to talk about, I think, is a positive. That sewer service area also includes the Raya Corporation's development in the Harvest Lane area. And they are hoping that this will work its way through because they have some property there they can't put septic on, and they have approval to build houses, and they need to connect to sewer. And the only chance of sewer is if this particular project was to go forward. And that would be standard single-family homes, whatever. And the reason, I'm sure the commission all knows the reason, that it was over-excavated and filled in, and that's unacceptable to North Central for septic systems. So to complete their development of single-family homes, they need to find a way to connect to sewer, and this is the only hope they have. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, I'm not sure, but it is possibly a method for this development to recoup some of the costs of sewer, if they had an agreement with somebody else who had to share in the cost to make it all work. I'm just throwing that out there. We've been through this at the WPCA many times with the Raya Corporation, and there's nothing we can do. I mean, we would not have a problem with them connecting, but it has to connect in a proper manner. So I'm just pointing that out for what it's worth. I don't know if it's a good or a bad.
Thank you, Paul, for the additional
Thank you.
information. Yes, Anna?
Yes, hi.
Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Anna Mangiafico, 35 Sullivan Farm Road. My property is directly adjacent to the SJK properties. I have to my left and to the rear of my home. And I have no issue whatsoever having 66 single-family homes sitting to the side of me. I think it will be tastefully done. I know that my family would not do anything to take away from my my property value or from my quality of life. And actually, this is better for me personally because we don't lose our cul-de-sac. Because if we were to go with the original plan, which was the subdivision of 48 homes, we would have through traffic coming in from Depot Street. People would be cutting through, and over on Hemlock Court, people would be cutting through, and they'd be cutting through the whole entire neighborhood. This way, nobody cuts through the neighborhood. So I just wanted to reemphasize that I have no issue with it.
Thank you. Someone else? Anyone else? George, yes, go right ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dan.
May I ask a question that
Give your
previous,
name.
I just said Yelena Dick, 7 Eastwood Drive, Broadbridge, Connecticut. May I just point out that as far as I understand, the last person who spoke is the sister of Merrick. Am I right?
I wouldn't know. I don't know who that person is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. I am the sister.
Explains a lot. I just want to say that in my opinion, what's going on here is an example of greed, pure and simple. And you guys who sit in the town committees should decide what's best for the town, not for one particular person, no matter how dear and near to you he is. You should speak and think about all of us who live here, who pay our taxes. When we bought this property, when we planned our life here, we put a lot of money in it, and we don't want it to go down the drain just because somebody wants to get more money from the land that supposedly initially was planned for just 38 or 36 and then 40 something homes. You know, I personally do not have any trust in this company. I feel that they may change course at any time because they will find another reason which they will call a material change. In my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but I read the letter that Paul Robert wrote. He's my neighbor, he's a lawyer, and he clearly said there that there is no material change that the applicant showed you in this application. So of course it's up to you, but I feel that you have to stand up for the little guy who lives here, who has his life savings put into his or her property, and that all may go down the drain. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you.
Someone else? Anyone else? Jennifer, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Jennifer Abbey, 32 Rice Road. I would just like to state that I would like to see Merrick and his family be profitable with this land, but my concern is how it affects the other plots in town. And I would just like the board and the commission to take that into consideration, that even though it is just a slight text change, it does affect other areas in this town.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Can I just throw out something? How does this affect anybody out there? How does this affect their properties? There's going to be no access through the development. They won't even see these houses. This is on a 65 acre piece of property. How is this going to affect anybody out there? I don't understand where they're all coming from. It's
I think it just
frustrating.
It just opens up other areas in town to have things move in that maybe people don't want.
But it doesn't, because every application has to come in front of this board for a zone change. They have the discretion to accept or deny.
Right, but how many times are residents going to have to fight certain things off if we do make this text amendment?
Not many, because it's really only isolated to a handful of properties.
And how many is a handful of properties?
Whatever was on that map, I'm not gonna get into a debate.
Neither will I.
Any other comments from the audience? Okay, I'm going to circle back with members of the commission. Now we've heard a lot of comments. I think 15 or 16 people spoke at a couple different times. Does the members of the commission have any additional questions for either town staff or the applicant before we consider closing the public hearing? So Ann, why don't I start with you? Do you have anything else you want to know at this time?
The one thing that, and it may not be worth the level of effort it would take to unscramble, is the history on the zoning density. And how long ago, what we can unearth about why changes were made. That's the only thing I felt didn't fully get answered. And since Mike D'Amato wasn't here and we've had so many town planners, it may be more effort than is doable to unscramble.
Well, Ian, if that information were unscrambled and it would be easily accessible, how would that help you make an informed decision? What piece of information would that help unlock?
For me, it would unlock if the request on the table is really for what people are alleging is too many units, an unfair number of units.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, if there was good, reason, or it was just, best practices changed over time and they've changed again, that's, one thing. If there, a piece of me wonders, since the plan of development, of conservation and development sets out this idea of very rural areas and denser areas, if it was thought out and the two, I'll say, run in sync, where we wanted less density in the rural areas.
Okay.
And if there was a good history that documented that, it would help me make my decision. And it may be something that can't be unearthed.
Jim, how about you? Do you have any additional information or questions you want to ask at this time?
No, just I want to comment on Lance and Mary's comment about being in my backyard or anybody else on the commission's backyard. There's actually a piece of property which Merrick showed, which is a field right across the street from my house. So it's that property can be developed if this text amendment goes forward. So it does affect members of the commission. You might not realize that. So that's all I wanted to put out there. No, I have no other questions. Thank you.
Frank, do you have any comments or concerns?
Well, not really. I would like to have our town planner summarize what has happened tonight in his opinion and go over everything that's been said and how he sees it.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh,
wait.
You want me to wait?
Yeah, wait. I'm gonna give the other Mike an opportunity to weigh in here.
I think I've heard everything I needed to hear.
Okay. Fair enough. Go ahead, Mike D'Amato.
Couple of things, sort of unrelated points that I want to make and try to address Frank's point. There seems to be a lot of concern, again, about what I keep calling the potential universe of properties that would be eligible for a change to the MFDD. One of the things that I think Merrick did with his evaluation is point out the properties that would be subject to the change, to a zone change based on the tweaks he's making. So the existing MFDD says you can have apartments on properties along Route 5 that are 4 acres or whatever. That analysis was not done because that's not proposed to be changed. So I don't want there to be this idea that the only properties shown are that's it. There are properties that are eligible for other uses that exist today, and we're not proposing that change. So I don't believe that was part of Merrick's analysis, and I'll let him verify that or not after I'm done. Part of what I would be willing to look into is this concern about all of these properties. And if the commission wanted to dial it back and didn't want to include the ag zone as part of this, if the only concern is that this may be spot zoning, we can talk about that. There's some recent case law which affirms and essentially the idea of spot zoning is really scary and it's something we hear a lot about, but it's really hard to show that this would be a spot zone, right? There has to be some intent and a lot of other things in the works. So if the commission was comfortable, but didn't see a reason to include the ag zone, and Merrick only included it because he was concerned about that, the optics of spot zoning, we can talk about that. So I just want to put that out there. I will absolutely do what I can to verify the change in the density. But the one thing that I want to kind of point out is that the majority of the discussion tonight has been related to Merrick's project. This application has nothing to do with Merrick's project. We cannot have these discussions for the pure and simple fact that you are supposed to make your decision based on evidence in the record. And if all of the discussion is related to things specific to his project, we won't have evidence in the record for you to make a decision. So that's not to say that the points made tonight are not important. They are, but they are important in the next step if this application is approved. There's a lot of good points that were made about stuff related to sewer and concerns about traffic and how this application fits into other areas of town and the POCD. All of that is extremely relevant, but we need to be very careful when we are building this record because the commission has to use it to make a decision. So and hopefully I've addressed Frank's point, and that's not to suggest that any of this stuff is unimportant. I want to make that clear. I just, from a procedural perspective, the discussion has got to be limited to the text amendment and had nothing to do with Corey Meadows or any of that stuff. That's step 2.
Thank you, Mike. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
So Mike D'Amato, I have a question for you. Personally, I'm having a tough time with the definition of material change. Now, Merrick provided some testimony regarding what his interpretation of the changes. In no doubt, there is change between the last proposed text amendment and this. But how do you quantify what is material change? And is there a planner's dictionary that helps define that? Because you could, I guess, as you said it earlier, you could make an argument one way or another. But at the end of the day, let's say, for example, that it's decided that there's not enough material change. All we've done is postponed action for potentially another 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, whatever it is. Then the applicant, as of right, can come back 1 year after. So I don't want to get hung up on some wording just to postpone matters that ultimately we all need to be, it needs to be resolved in some way, whether or not the text amendment is approved or denied. And if it's approved, there's no guarantee of any development. And that means that there's some potential next steps for the Kemet family, that's all.
Yeah, so you're correct. And material change in the situation is a very subjective term, but your point that you made is a good one. If the only thing that the commission is hung up on is what this says, but you all would be totally comfortable with hearing this exact application in 11 months, then I think that probably gives you a little bit of an answer, right? The idea that a simple passage of time would change the application in some way, there's nothing that's going to change here. We already have sort of litigated that issue. So I would say the commission has that discretion. You can certainly discuss it and you can figure out how you feel as a board and which way you're leaning. But if you would be completely comfortable with hearing this application in a year, the only thing that would have changed is that we're all a year older. There's nothing on the property is going to change. So, the regulations are going to apply in the same way. We don't have anything else pending. There's no potential sewer expansion nearby. There's nothing that the town's going to do in that time to change the situation. So I guess that's a long way of saying you guys have the power to make that decision as a commission, but I understand what your point.
Frank, you're illuminated. Do you want to say something or you just moved?
No,
So-
I don't. I guess I just moved.
That happens to my box too. Whenever I move, it illuminates. So I'm going to circle back with members of the community. We're going to consider closing the public hearing tonight. Not that we may take action, closing the hearing. So this will be a final opportunity tonight to make some comments on the record. So is there anything new information or new requests or new comments that we haven't already heard from members of the audience? I'm not seeing any. So Merrick, do you want to have any final comments as we move forward? Because I'm gonna query the commission whether or not we have enough information to close the public hearing. And I don't know if we'll be taking any action tonight, but I am going to suggest that we close the public hearing tonight.
No, I understood. The only thing, you know, I'll add is that if you do want to further restrict it to just be for the R3 zone, we're fine with that. Like I said, the reason is we left the agriculture is I didn't want to create the spot zoning for that one section of the property. So if you want to further restrict it, that's fine with us. No, I just thank you for your time and consideration again.
Okay, thank you very much. So members of the commission, do we have enough information that we want to consider closing the public hearing?
I do.
I'm all set. I'm all set.
I've already heard enough affirmative, so why don't we take a vote on that?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just jump in, if
Yes.
I'm gonna get you some of the information that I sort of have on my list of to-dos, that should probably be presented during the hearing because we may want to hear from Merrick. If you folks feel you don't need it to make a decision, that's fine. You can close it, but I just want to make sure that I'm doing my homework if necessary for the next meeting.
Thank you, Mike, for bringing that point up. So Ann, I don't want to mischaracterize what you mentioned earlier, but you felt that was an important piece of information for you to make an informed decision as we reach closure on the application.
It would help me in making my decision, yes.
Okay. Any other member of the commission feel that they would benefit from that piece of information?
So
Can I add something?
one
Go ahead,
is
Mike.
enough. I would say one is enough for me. If she wants more information, we should entertain her request.
Okay. So with that,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, real
Sure.
quick. Just that, I believe town staff can give you that information after a public hearing is closed. I think Mike was saying that if I wanted to rebut anything, you would have to leave it open. But honestly, I can't think of anything else that can be said on my end. Everything's been laid out and laced. So if you want to close the public hearing tonight, and end it that way and have town staff, you know, provide that documentation for you guys, that's fine with instead of prolonging it for another 2 weeks for nothing, because there's nothing I can probably say.
Mike D'Amato, are you in agreement with that? Is that a true representation if?
I would much rather discuss closing the public hearing at the next meeting and making a decision than worry about potentially introducing what could be argued as new evidence following the public hearing. Because if something I tell you at the next meeting, you may use to make a decision, I would much rather that be part of the public hearing, particularly when we had so much discussion from the public about this potential change in the density between the 1 unit per acre to 0.9. If you guys are at that point, all you need is that information, whether you leave it open tonight or hear that and close it the next meeting, I would prefer you allow the hearing to remain open. That would be my preference.
Become apparent to me, no matter what direction or whatever suggestion I make, I'm never going to be able to make everybody happy. So what I'm going to do is I think is right. I'm going to ask the commission for a motion to continue the public hearing to our next meeting. So if someone would like to offer that motion.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing on application PZ 2021-19 for a text amendment application to section 802.4. It's a multifamily development district. The applicant is SJK Properties. And it would be continued to our next regular meeting, which is, I just have to look at a calendar unless somebody knows.
June 22nd.
Okay, till the June 22nd meeting.
There's a motion on the table to continue the public hearing to June 22nd. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There is a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
I see 5 hands, so the public meeting is a continuation to our next meeting of June 22nd, 2021. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up under new business, item A, ZBA 2021-02 for a variance request, 7A Pasco Drive.
Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this. A bit has changed since we originally added this to the agenda. You remember a number of months ago, an applicant or one of the owners of the units in Pasco Commons, Unit 7A, came before you to talk about an informal discussion for a text amendment because he had a 3-unit structure, a 3-story structure, and he wanted to have a mixed space on the main level. And the sense that I think properly he got from the commission was that it was an appropriate request, but it was so specific that a text amendment, you know, because of the way the units were laid out, it just wasn't an appropriate thing for a text amendment, but that it was absolutely an appropriate request. So he filed an application with the ZBA. In looking at the zoning regulations, the type of request that he would be asking for is considered to be a use variance. Our regulations have a number of things that are required for use variances, one of which is a referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in looking at the application, and I didn't work with him from the beginning, and looking at our zoning regulations, I personally feel that our regulations as written don't actually prohibit what he wants to do. We have specific standards for the siting of these units above the first floor and below, but there's nothing in the regulations that says they can't be on the first floor. Also, given the fact that this property has access on multiple levels, there's a little bit of a gray area as far as which is actually the ground floor. So before he goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals to seek a use variance, which requires a referral to you folks, and then a number of criteria, which are complicated because one of them says if you can get a special permit from Planning and Zoning to do it, then the ZBA can't issue you a use variance. So I can read you the language, but my goal here tonight is to have a sense from the commission if you think I'm reading this in a way that would allow this via special permit, or if he needs to go to ZBA, and if so, what your sense is as the commission as part of that referral. But I'll read you the language. It says residential units may be permitted above the first story, and provided the units are not exposed as part of the main facade below the first story. Those units below the first story must be limited to studio apartments, not to exceed 900 square feet in area. And residential units in commercial buildings require a special permit and must meet the following criteria. And then there's 5 or 6 criteria. So he's on that middle story. He meets all of the criteria. So if the commission felt it was appropriate, he would come before you for a special permit to create a living unit and that existing commercial space on that first floor or the middle floor. If you felt that wasn't the way the language read, then he would need the use variance. But I was looking at it, and given the criteria that East Windsor has for use variances and what he needs to be able to show, I was worried that the ZBA may read the regulations and say, no, this needs to go for a special permit and deny the variance. So I wanted to come here first.
I recall I do recall the entire conversation, but part of the conversation I do recall was about access and about an elevator. and it was handicap access. Is that more of a building standard rather than a concept that needs to be considered before the Planning and Zoning Commission? So we had a long discussion about that.
Right.
Is that weighs the decision-making process?
One of the 6 criteria that our regulations have is that buildings with residential units above the second floor must have an elevator. But because this unit has ground floor access on multiple sides, the unit that he's asking to create the apartment in has at-grade access. So he would not need to deal with that because he would be able to have access right from the right side of the building.
He's on the hill, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So the left side of the building has access to the lower portion of the road, and then the right side has at-grade access to that middle level.
Yep.
Mike, in all fairness to you, you kind of weren't the lead on this one when it first came in, so you hadn't fully done your research or have your spin on it. Is that the reason why this is coming up now versus a month ago?
Right. Yeah. And I talked with him and I said, listen, I don't want to pump the brakes, 2 days away from a variance request, but I'm reading some of these requirements, and not only do I have concerns, but the ZBA is not supposed to issue a variance unless there's no other means for reasonable use of the property. And if the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is going to be obligated to review this anyways and give some comment if they so choose to the ZBA, I can't get you a decision in 2 days anyways. So let's pump the brakes and let's ask the Planning and Zoning Commission how this language reads, because there's a lot of flexibility that we have as far as approvals related to special permits. But if we give you the variance, we don't have those same criteria because it's a variance on the use. And he was comfortable with that. I sent him the criteria and he verified that he would meet all of the criteria. So that's why I felt like it made sense to first ask you.
Mike, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, I mean, I may be looking at this too simply, but it seems to me like that we could solve this just by how you classify each level. I mean, you could either look at it as basement, first floor, second floor, or first floor, second floor, third floor. And just in the matter of how you classify how the building is laid out, can you use one to your advantage over the other to accomplish what you want?
I think that's a good point, and I agree. What do you call the first floor? Because depending on where you park, you're entering on the ground floor. Is the ground floor the first floor? In Europe, I guess, what do you push, 0 versus 1, and you don't know where the elevator is going to go. But I agree. I think
like
that
it's like a house with a walkout basement. Where do you enter?
Right, and in my read of the regulations, the requirements are, the intent of the requirements really appear to trying to make sure that the size of the units, of the residential units, are appropriate and that they're not being crammed into any old space like in the attic or here and there, that they're not going to adjust the main facade of the building. It's all tangible criteria. It's not really getting into we're worried about the overall layout. And the special use permit that was originally granted for the property, it was they asked for a special permit for residential units on the second floor. That's what it was issued as. So it wasn't that the special permit limited them to that, but that's what they asked permission for. So that's what they were given. So this would be a special permit beyond that. It wouldn't modify that approval, but it would drop an additional special permit on just this unit for this one specific purpose, so that the original approval was completely intact. But I personally feel this is a more appropriate path, and I don't like to see variances issued if there's another approach. But you're the boss.
So, Jim, how do you feel about what's been presented tonight? Do you have a strong opinion one way or the other?
It's a tricky one. Technically he's got 2 first floors, and then they only allow for residential on the second floor and commercial below. So and that's the only building like that in that whole Pasco Commons, I believe, right? Mike, I believe.
I missed the first part of what you're saying.
I think that's the only building that's like that in Pasco's, with the 3 floors like that.
I tried to look at that. That's from what I could tell, yes. So it is because of the way that grade is changed. But yeah, I was trying to figure out if the commission limited the residential units to the second floor, and because they said the first floor is not appropriate, or if that was just how the application came in, and it kind of seems like it was just how it was requested. But yeah, it's complicated.
So technically his first floor could be commercial, second floor could be residential, third floor could be residential, but now you need an elevator.
Right, but again, that's why in reading the language, there's nothing that prohibits first floor residential. It just speaks to the specific design criteria if it's above the first floor or below. So it's not written well. We've been in this situation before. Kind of tricky. So yeah, looking for what your sense is.
If we defined it as basement, first floor, second floor, would it meet the criteria?
I think so, because there's nothing in the regs that prohibits prohibits it. So I think that if that's how you interpreted that section of the regulations, then I think he would be eligible for a special permit. Yes.
Ian, do you have an opinion?
I don't really have a problem with giving him the special permit as long as we don't open a can of worms for other properties.
I concur.
You mean apply for, we're not giving him anything. You mean be receptive to the application process. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Frank, how about you?
I concur with Ann. I think the application process is the way to go.
So Mike, I think you have your answer. Just about, I think it's unanimous. I think that you've stumbled upon something, and we appreciate your guidance on this one. And I think the course of action that you've laid out for us seems a little more appropriate.
Yeah, I think I'll talk to them about it. And I had suggested, because this was a unique situation with the property, the commission, you could put a 3-year time limit on the special permit and say, we're going to come back and see how it's working. Are the tenants complaining? Are the commercial tenants, or do we have parking issues? You could absolutely kind of do that and test it out and say, okay, well, now that we've given you a couple of years, we haven't had any complaints, there's no issues, we can have that. But with the variance, we can't, the horse is out of the barn. So I think this is a better approach. I'll talk with him about it, and I expect you'll see him in the month or so.
Mike,
Awesome.
I agree with your idea. The less variances we have, the better we are off.
Okay, so Mike, you have what you need on that one.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. So we revised the order of our agenda. So I guess now would be a time to talk about our West River Farms.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I guess I have to apologize for talking at you so much tonight, but so we're in a bit of a unique situation. I told you one of the things we're trying to do is take a much stronger perspective and stance on bonds because of the historic issues that have kind of plagued some of the developments we have. The West River Farms project, we were noticed not all that long ago that the bank, that the letters of credit, the bank that was holding those had been sold. They went from United Bank, and United was acquired by Peoples. So there was a notice of cancellation, which they're required by the letter of credit to provide to the town. They indicated that the bonds would be transferred, and that they would essentially have a closing, which would then be picked up by Peoples. The problem is the bonds that were in place expire in 3 weeks. So we've been working with them to try and verify the renewal process, and have been kind of going back and forth on a lot of things. And they've indicated that the bonds should be completely renewed and letters of credit restored by the end of this week, no later than June 15th, which is prior to the July 5th expiration. But the problem that we have is it takes a really long time to call bonds. So if we cross our fingers that these bonds will be renewed and July 5th comes and goes and this closing that the bank has promised will happen does not happen, the bonds have expired and we have a subdivision that has no bonding. So while every indication that we have been given makes me feel that we are in good shape as far as the bonds being renewed. We have a letter in the file from People's Bank, which indicates that I'm pulling it up to give you the number, all the letters of credit and the total amounts. There was some sense that we should start the process of having this discussion with the commission and suggest the commission basically vote to start the process of going through calling the bond, so that if things do go south, we're in motion. And again, this is no reflection on the project. We're not suggesting that there's all kinds of issues or the developer has any intentions of doing anything improper, but we're trying to protect the town. So rough estimates, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters of credit, which are to be renewed no later than June 10th, according to the bank, which roughly total $220,000, I would say. So my goal tonight, even though I suspect it won't be necessary, is for the commission to take a vote to essentially agree that because we have no choice, we should start the process to call the bond so that if June 10th gets here and we don't have a renewal, we are in progress.
Are there any other options? So the reason, this is very uncustomary where you will call a bond for something that's not in compliance, but as a precautionary measure, as a risk management technique. That's really is, you're trying to manage risk for the town. And in your position, as well as ours, we should always be looking out for that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a unique situation because the banks were acquired. So under normal circumstances, we get a notice of non-renewal. We call them and say the project is still in progress. You can't let this expire, and they would renew it. But because the banks are transferring, there's essentially a closing that has to take place, and the new bank has to take on those letters of credit, which has stalled the process. We've been working on this for 5 weeks. And we finally got to the point where we said, we need the letters of credit to be renewed, or you're going to have to put up a cash bond between the 10th and July 5th in lieu of, or we're going to call it. So as far as options are concerned, the only other option is to cross our fingers, which I really don't want to resort to.
So something, it's just an observation though. It so happens that financial institution is, I have them. And yes, they were United Bank, People's United, they bought them out, but that bank yet in itself is going to be merged with somebody else moving forward, Buffalo or something like that. It's well publicized in the paper. So this is a continue. How does that play into the process? It seems like this closing is something like it was a new acquisition. This People's United is something that's been, I got letters in my file, unless this is a commercial lending division, which is different than the other division parts of the bank. This is not new news.
Yeah, so this is, you are correct. It's not new. Like I said, we did get the notice of the renewal. The folks doing this are the commercial real estate department. It's not the residential side. These are 7 commercial letters of credit. So it is tricky. And I mean, I can read to you what we received. It says this letter is to acknowledge People's United Bank has full approval to extend the letters of credit related to the West River Farms LLC project located in the town of East Windsor. At this time, the attorneys are preparing the documentation for the closing of the transaction. This closing will occur no later than June 10, 2021. If you have questions, please contact me. They list the letters of credit and the individual amounts, and it's signed Matthew Callahan, who's the vice president of. So again, this is not meant to alarm anyone that we're going to be out money, but we're trying to, as you said, manage the risk. And because the process to call a bond takes so much time, I don't want to come to you at the second meeting in June or in July when everything has expired and say, now we have to make up for lost time. That's really the focus, but I suspect this will be a non-issue. That's my hope.
If, Mike, just one more point to make, I'll get right to you. So Mike D'Amato, my question is, if we go down this road and we take the action as requested, how do we rescind the process? Let's say everything falls in line like it's supposed to. Is there any action required on the commission's part after the fact?
My suggestion would be that your vote is that if the letters of credit are not extended as of June 11th, because then we would start the process.
Okay.
So I think that gives us some wiggle room.
All right, perfect. Mike Kozlowski. So I'm sorry about butchering your name.
My only question is, if we begin the calling of the bond, does that affect the contractor's credit at all? Are we going to negatively impact his business that it'll show that there was a bond called against him?
If we call the bond, I would imagine it would create a whole host of issues for him, but this process that you're going to consider tonight simply gets the ball in motion. Next step for me would be to provide the documentation to Len to go out onto the property to get an evaluation of where the project sits, what inconsistencies or deficiencies we have, and get an idea of if the bonding that was in place is adequate. And then we would likely have to do a whole bunch of noticing, and there'd be a very long process. So any formal notifications would be a long ways away. This tonight would not.
Okay,
This is
I
just like-
wouldn't want to do any undue harm to the contractor, for no fault of his.
Mike, shouldn't a letter of intent cover that? Not pulling,
The
Okay.
letter of intent to renew.
yeah, to carry it over?
Yeah, I think that, well, for one, we got this letter like at the end of last week because they were saying, yeah, don't worry about it. It's going to close. The attorneys are reviewing the documents. It should be fine. It should be fine. And I finally said, this is not going to cut it. If we don't have a bond in place, you're going to have to put up cash. We were reviewing everything because I don't want to take your word for it. We have letters of credit that were reviewed when the subdivision approval was extended in June. You folks gave them a 5-year extension, I believe, in June, or renewal. But we just want the town to be covered. And we want to make sure that it's clear to anyone that we're not going to allow the bonds to expire. So this is as much about this project as it is about every other project we have, and letting them know that if we get to this point, we're going to take the steps to call the bond. But yes, I think, as you said, this is largely covered.
And they're not willing to put up cash to cover
Yeah.
that amount?
I
Isn't
think
it like
that,
25 grand, isn't 250,000, right?
yeah,
Oh, that's just pocket change, right? Right, Jim?
Yeah, I got that.
I think that if we got to that point and we get to June 11th, June 12th, and we don't have them renewed, and they know that the commission has already made that vote to start the process, then that gives us that additional leverage to say, listen, like, we are very serious about this. The town has had these issues in the past, and I've made that very clear to the developer. We're just gun shy. And he understands that.
Frank, you have an opinion here?
No, I think Mike D'Amato's going in the right direction. Sometimes just the act of doing something clears up a lot of issues, especially in the future.
We're all put in a position to look out for the town's interest too, compliance of regulations and standards, and this is no different. So, Mike, you had your hand up?
I was going to say, have we had anybody review to see is that letter, commitment letter, is that binding?
We haven't had anyone review this because of when we got it, the email or the letter that we had received previously, which was much more sort of lackadaisical in not confirming that it will happen by this date in the review of council was not sufficient. And so that's when we started having these discussions, and this was added to the agenda. Since getting this on the agenda and setting everything up, we've received this letter, which is much more definitive. But there's, I have no idea. Something could happen with the property. There could be issues with the business that could cause whatever he is potentially being leveraged for this credit to change, and so we just didn't want to take that risk. But it's not been evaluated at this point.
So do you have a proposed motion for us? Because I didn't see any correspondence in our package about this.
No, because again, I finally, by the time I heard back to what the first step is in calling the bond, I didn't have time for that. I would simply suggest that the motion be that if the letters of credit are for West River Farms are not extended as indicated in the letter as of June 10th, that the town begin the process of preparing to call the bond. And then if that's the case, at the next meeting, when it's appropriate, I will have a more formal report for you with guidance from the town attorney as to how we need to proceed.
And do you want Mike to go over that one more time, his motion? Or you think you got it?
It would be better if you said it one more time. I was starting to write it.
I saw you rip out your pen.
We type something up in that way.
Maybe Mike has it already typed up and we can just,
That would be much easier.
I know Mike already has it typed up.
I get the feeling from the commission that there's enough support for us at least to even have it, just even put this on the table for a vote. So I think this is the right mechanism to head in, the direction to head in, I should say.
I agree, Joe.
Hopefully it's not needed. It's just there in case the town has to move.
Mike, are we making you work extra hard on your birthday?
Oh, it's your birthday. Oh,
No,
happy
sir.
birthday.
Man, oh man, no, this is not a big deal for me. I spend my birthday, my dog and I share a birthday, so I tell everybody we celebrate his birthday, not mine.
Oh.
How I dodged the bullet. All right, must be in the present.
And while Mike is coming up with some fancy words, were you all in receipt of Jason's email today regarding notice of going back to in-person meetings effective July 1?
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes, we were asked to share that information.
I didn't.
So probably what I'll do, maybe Mike was going to bring this up during our business meeting, but I'll ask him to ask staff to forward this to everybody. Jason put a nice email together, thanking us for our service during these difficult times, and as of July 1st.
Good. Thanks for changing my name, Joe. Did you do that?
No.
I did.
Oh, I did something.
I did it when you signed in.
Oh, thanks, Mike. My computer just crashed. We both have the same computer. We have the all-in-one computers. Mine just cut out. I'm like, oh, great.
So that would make our first in-person meeting July 13th.
Yeah, the first meeting of July, whatever. Yeah, correct. Just in time, Mike, for your annual vacation.
Well, it's funny. I actually fly back in on the 11th, so I might be able to actually make it.
Where you going without me?
Going to Memphis, buddy.
I know.
Come on down.
The race vacations are over.
No. Just well, we have a short one this year. Next year we'll do better.
Why Memphis?
My wife wants to see Graceland.
Okay.
There's something called Google Earth.
Yeah.
Happy
There's also
wife,
something
happy
called
life.
Life.
There's a nice hotel in Memphis where the ducks go through the lobby.
We're staying right at Graceland.
Okay.
So Frank, how are the Red Sox doing tonight?
I don't know. I gotta check in. Well, I'll check in with my wife. Let's see.
Obviously, we can't talk baseball in front of Jim. He's not too happy with us.
Oh,
No, I don't care.
You
yeah,
don't care
well,
about? Oh, okay, well,
Uh-oh, what happened?
no,
Oh, there you
no.
go.
there we go.
Well, thank you.
So Ann, go right ahead whenever you're ready to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to begin the process of calling all bonds currently in place for West River Farms LLC for the West River Farms LLC project, provided the letters of credit referenced in the June 3rd, 2021 letter from People's United Bank are not extended as of June 10th, 2021. The reference letters of credit include, and I'll reference the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items on the screen.
There is a motion on the table to begin the process to calling all the bonds in place for West River Farms LLC. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye or raise their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I hear 5 ayes, it's 5 hands, so it passes unanimously. Thanks, Mike D'Amato, for walking us through that process.
Thank you for doing that on the fly. I apologize. I didn't get you anything in the packet.
Do you want to take us to the next item on the agenda, the business meeting, the legislative update? Or correspondence, whatever one, you know.
Yeah, all right, let me just, this, Peg, I just sent you the language for the motion.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to give you a quick update, and if the commission wants, we can print out the summary for the next packet, or I can email it, but 6107, which HB 6107 is essentially the revision to the revision to the revision to the revision of what was the massive housing bill that everybody heard about when the legislative session started. It was significantly reduced. A lot of stuff was removed. Much of what was originally seen as controversial was removed. But I just wanted to let you know that it did pass. What remained is a language related to accessory dwelling units, that they are to be allowed as of right unless the commission and town goes through the opt-out process, which was provided. There was some language relating to the review of multifamily and affordable housing applications, which is not really applicable here because East Windsor is above the 10%. There's some language that strengthens our obligation to zone and enable housing opportunities. And some stuff related to, again, evaluating traffic impacts and measuring that related to vehicle miles traveled and vehicle trips per day. It says that we can't prohibit, quote, cottage food activities, and dictates minimum or reductions in parking standards for things like studio, 1-bedroom and 1-bedroom apartments. But that also has an opt-out provision for the town. It requires that anybody performing zoning enforcement be certified by the Casio. And it puts a training requirement in for land use commissions, which was significantly reduced. It was originally like 6 hours for the first year and then a number of hours for each one. And now it was reduced to, I can't remember what it was, but I'll try to read through. 4 hours for every 2 years. So I can provide that to you. So if you want to kind of read through it and give you the links to the bills themselves, but that was passed in both the House and the Senate. We expect it to be signed by the governor probably today or tomorrow. So that is how that all shook out.
So the training requirements for land use commissions, is that a look forward requirement, or if you can provide evidence in the past that you've attended training? So these are all new requirements, so everyone's starting with ground zero for training?
Yes, but it's 2024. So it's not like a second it's signed, we all have to have that. So there's a period of time where there's going to be
a phase in.
Correct. And it's it would be fairly easy for, the language was reduced as far as, originally it was proposed for all land use commissions, and it said it had to be in ethics and land use and housing, and so that's all gone. So it's much more flexible, and a lot of towns are talking about building in, like on a quarterly basis, a little half an hour, either it's a presentation by staff or something from an attorney that just kind of keeps everybody up to speed without having to send folks to a 2-hour training on a Friday night, so that's not meant to be alarming, but that's where we are.
I wonder if our AquaTurf annual meeting covers that.
The CZFPO or the Steve Byrne.
Casio meeting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's got to be, I think that's the one that's the Connecticut Association. I forget what it is. It's not Casio because we don't have our meetings at the AquaTurf, but the CCAPA, OPM establishes the guideline. Casio, CCAPA, and Yukon Clear are going to work to identify the trainings and then figure out the tracking and reporting so that it's not just left to every individual. But it will be a non-issue for, you guys have enough meetings and between your business meetings and things like that, we should be able to work something out.
It wouldn't surprise me that due to this current society, a lot of online trainings are now available. So they may have an online version. You could do it at your own leisure. And, take a brief test or a summary at the end to see what skills or what you recall from the slides you saw earlier. That type of thing.
That's exactly it. And frankly, the only reason for this is that, and not that we're subject to that here, but, even I live in West Hartford, and there's some bad case law and there's some bad legislation and things that we have to do simply because people weren't trained and they made decisions and they didn't, necessarily know what was at stake. And so we end up with these crazy laws and these crazy requirements because of bad land use decisions. So the goal is to stop that cycle.
Mike, something for, I'll say, thought. For the things you have to opt out of, if you don't want them to apply to the town, is there a timeline by when you have to opt out, or is that open-ended? The reason I ask is if, like, you can't require parking spaces for efficiency units or 1-bedroom units. We're not that, I'll say, urban, that people are all going to take the bus and the train in East Windsor.
Right.
So I don't want to miss the opt-out if there are things we need to consider.
Yep. So there's a timeline which says that by January of 2023, the town has to either allow them or opt out for the accessory dwelling units. And for the parking, for example, that just says if you have a studio apartment, that is 1 space. If you have a 2-bedroom, it's 2 spaces. They don't want towns, because there were towns that were using the parking requirements as a way to essentially make it so you couldn't have an in-law apartment, because they'd say, well, you have a house, so you need 4 spaces, and then you have an in-law apartment, so you need another 2, and a single car driveway couldn't show 6 parking spaces, so they'd say, sorry. So that's what that is trying to do.
I was afraid they were going to say, You're not allowed to have parking spaces.
No, 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 no. Yeah, absolutely not.
I don't want to get into the weeds here, but does that opt-out provision need to be by the chief elected official from the town, or that comes from the planning and zoning board? I mean, what entity makes those decisions?
It's a two-step process requiring action by the zoning commission and legislative body for municipalities where the town meeting is a legislative body. It can be authorized by the board of selectmen.
Okay, very similar like adoption of POCD, that multi-step process. Okay,
But if
checks and
you-
balances. That's okay.
I assume you'd need a public notice and public hearing.
Well,
Well,
that
we'll-
is a,
we have plenty of time.
that's a darn good question. I don't know that yet, but we'll figure it out.
Well, my term will be over by then. I won't have to worry about it. Mike, do you have anything you want to talk about under correspondence or other business?
I don't have anything else. Nope.
I was unable to attend the meeting that happened on Monday. The Economic Development Commission met. Were you able to attend that, or was any?
It wasn't, I, by the time I got it on my calendar, I had a conflict, but I know that there was a presentation that was done, I guess it was I don't know why I feel like it was last week with Advanced CT, Courtney Hendrickson. And that presentation was provided to the town. So if anybody was interested, I think that we would probably be able to get you the slide deck from that so that you could go through it. If
You
you
sent
were-
it out
Oh.
today. So if anyone didn't get it, Peg has it.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing it personally. Okay.
We'll send you that and you can take a look at it, and I'll send you the bill synopsis too.
Does anyone else have anything for the good of the order for tonight? Yes, Mike. Oh, you're not coming through your audio.
Okay, good old mute again. Now, I had a question for Mike. Looking through, you had sent us something back in December about a lawsuit that we were named in, part of the Silverman Group development. Did anything develop from that?
I don't have any updates, so there may be things that are happening. I can follow up, and if there's anything actionable to report, I'll put an executive session on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right, because it looks to me like the development's finished.
Yes, from the project's perspective, we did do a CO on the building probably 3 weeks ago now. We did a site walk, we reviewed everything. The only outstanding items that they were really hammering on was trying to get together with DOT to make sure that they had everything they needed to do the improvements. They didn't have the clearance to use the site until that stuff was done. So even though the building is good to go, they couldn't get their tenant in. But we're sort of a fly on the wall to that process, but the compliance is set. One of the things you'll recall, we required a landscape maintenance bond. So we have a substantial bond that we will be holding for the duration of the growing season to make sure that all the landscaping within that berm area that was really important to screen the residents on South Water Street. We want to make sure that all those plantings don't die. So we'll make sure that's all established, and when that's taken care of, we'll release that bond.
The right turn lane isn't in all the way yet. They've been working on it on South Water.
Yeah.
Okay, and then has Calamar gave any kind of official notice to the town as far as it seems like, construction has stopped over there?
Yeah, I don't know about official notice, but yeah, the project is I think that there's some discussion with the bank, and the building official would know more, but I think for all intents and purposes, the current project with the current developer is completely paused.
With that in mind, has anyone gone out of the way to make sure that all the bonds are still in place on that one?
I do not know that. but I will look. I don't know. I don't know what would have been required, but I will get a report on that for the next meeting.
Well, because yeah, it looks like they started the beginnings of a sidewalk and left it that way. So that at a minimum would need to be completed.
Well, if you look inside, I talked to Rand, and inside the building, it's just rough framing. There's nothing even done, sheetrock, not even close to being done inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least from curb appeal, the building doesn't look bad, but the front of the, where they disrupted for the sidewalk does.
Yeah, I will pull some of that information and try to get you an update on that.
Okay, and can you also, I'm looking at my personal emails now, and Ann, thank you for sending the EDC minutes. I got that. Can you ask Amanda to forward Jason's email to the balance? Apparently, he just sent it to maybe some of the board chairs and technical staff, but regarding in-person meetings beginning July 1st.
Sure, no problem.
Anybody have anything else for tonight's meeting?
No, but something to think about maybe at the next meeting, our zoning enforcement, what's going on there? I haven't heard anything from them in quite a while.
Okay. Yeah, we should be due for a report, so I'll talk to Ruth about that.
Awesome. If there's anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
There's a motion. Is there a second? All
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Aye.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.